So moving on, we are going to be discussing in this particular session advertising as a managerial function. So generally with students who opt for this particular course, when I ask them that what do you expect from this particular course, they think something very, very glamorous, that it is all about creativity, it is all about creating some catchy slogans, or all about creating ads. And it is more like, for them, it is like the regular college festivals that we have, ad mad shows. I think of it as ad mad show or something of a similar sort, marketing game or an advertising game, but that is not a fact. Advertising is completely different, especially advertising management. It is not merely the act of creating catchy slogans or visually appealing commercials. It's a structured, it's a very, very well planned, organized, structured, systematic activities that involves planning, organizing, directing, and controlling promotional efforts to achieve a specific business objective. So it is not about just creating an ad. It is not about creating slogans. It is about achieving your business objectives with help of advertising, because advertising helps create innovative solutions. So advertising provides us with innovative and creative communication solutions to our marketing problems or our strategic business problems. So that is why advertising is very, very important. But at the same point of time, advertising management, I should say, is not merely about creating a slogan or an ad. Many times in my classes, when I give students some exercise, some of the students, especially in the early days, are disconnected. They create brilliant ads, but that ad has no connect with their marketing problem. So ultimately, everything has to flow from the marketing problem or the objectives of the client. So what are the core responsibilities? The first and the foremost core responsibility is to understand the market. You have to understand the consumer needs. You have to understand the consumer demographics and the psychographics. You have to look at the market structure. You have to look at your rivals, your competitors, changing trends, because consumers these days are very, very fickle. I mean, consumer tastes are changing. There are a lot of products or a lot of services which at one point of time were unpopular are today are very, very popular. It is because of the changing consumer tastes, consumer desires. Like, for example, Blinkit, Zomato, Swiggy. It is because of technology. But forget the technology part. A few years back, nobody would have thought of Blinkit and Swiggy and Instamart or Zomato. Why? Two things that I need to tell you. If you go back in time, if I go back in my student days, 90s, my college days, there was no eating out for my parents, not because they did not have the money, it was considered to be a taboo. Very few people of the Indian middle classes, especially husband and wife who were, let's say, middle aged, 45, 50, would go out and eat. That was not done because it was considered to be taboo. That's how our Indian system was. Or I should say, we are conservative. When I say Indian, I mean the entire Indian subcontinent. The culture was very, very conservative. It was not expected to go out and eat. Only the youngsters like us who were in college, who were going out and visiting the restaurants once in a while. But not my mom, not my dad. And not only not my mom or not my dad, my entire neighborhood or the people that I knew of. Nobody would go out and eat. Maybe once in a blue moon on some special occasion, but not on a weekly basis or a quarterly basis or a fortnightly basis or even a monthly basis. Never. So changing consumer taste, preferences, attitudes also matter a lot. Eating out was considered to be a taboo. So the company needs to keep on analyzing, and the process for advertising management revolves around understanding the market. You need to do a deep market analysis. Consumer insights are very, very important. Some 30 years back, there was no Ashirwad atta, there was no Patanjali atta, there was no Shakti Bhog atta, there was no Rajdhani atta. Why? It is not that some new technology has come in. It was because at that point of time, nobody was willing to buy packaged atta, because packaged atta was considered to be inferior as compared to the atta that was, procured at home, and it went through a grueling process under the observant eyes of the housewife or the dadis and nanis of the house. So they ensured that they had the best quality unadulterated atta. So they would get the grains, they would clean the grains, stock it in a granary, get it milled whenever atta was required. So that was the best atta. So if my grandmother is not alive, if I were to tell them that I'm having, market bought atta like Shakti Bhog or Ashirwad, if she were if she would turn in her grave, saying that that would contain adulteration and it would be impure. So consumer tastes have changed over a period of time, and that's a challenge. So you need to have an ear to the ground. So advertising management revolves around understanding the market, not only the consumers, but the economy and the competition. So competition is also very, very important to in order to solve the marketing problem or to have a creative solution to your marketing problem. Then the process also revolves around budget allocation. So in order to achieve your communication objectives, you need to have an adequate budget. So there are different ways of advertising budgeting, which we'll be taking up at a later stage. But budgeting decision is basically revolves around understanding what your objectives are, how do you want to achieve them, and what are the specific tasks which are required for achieving those objectives, and what is the amount of money that you can actually spare. So ultimately, all these decisions come under the budgeting decision. Then comes your campaign planning. So campaign planning is basically what should be the strategy, the advertising strategy, what should be the appeal, what should be the big idea, what should be the message, how do we say what we want to say, what kind of appeal should we use, what kind of, whether it should be dramatization, whether it should be fantasy, whether it should be slice of life, what kind of advertising, what should be the final, the way that we shoot the ad, and what should be the appropriate media mix. Then last but not the least is the performance evaluation part, where you evaluate how the campaign ran, what are the different objectives that it was able to achieve, was it able to change perceptions, was it able to generate sales, which is not a really, once again, let me just put it this way, it's not very easy to identify whether sales have gone up or gone down, or is there any change in sales due to advertising, because advertising always has a lagged effect unless and until it's a sales promotion campaign which is targeted towards immediate, the idea is to precipitate immediate sales. So advertising management, if I were to put it, transforms creative ideas into disciplined, goal oriented campaigns that drive measurable business results. And the goal of advertising management is to achieve organizational marketing objectives effectively and efficiently, ensuring every advertising dollar delivers maximum value. So if we're to look at it from a different perspective, what are the different functions of advertising management? It is a multi-step process. So you have planning, you have organizing, directing, controlling, and evaluating the entire process. So evaluation is one of the key things when it comes to advertising management. You need to understand where your dollars are going. Everybody is interested in this. No company has got unlimited resources. Be the biggest of the companies. At the end of the day, they want to know what advertising is doing for them. So there is a very, very interesting quote by an advertising legend. He says that, I know that half of my money is going waste, but I want to know which half. So in advertising planning, we start with the situation analysis. And what is the situation analysis? We have to understand where we stand vis-a-vis our consumers, vis-a-vis our rivals. So before any creative activity can take place, the advertising planner needs to thoroughly understand the market structure, the marketplace, the consumer, what drives the consumer, what is the consumer psychology. So you need to be adept at understanding the consumer behavior. And situation analysis usually starts with understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, followed by the consumer motivations and competitive dynamics which exist in that particular industry. So what are the key tools that are employed? The key tools which are employed is basically your SWOT analysis. So SWOT analysis, as we know, is basically a strength, weakness, and opportunity threat analysis. Strength and weaknesses are inherent to the company. Always remember that. Strength and weaknesses are always inherent to the company. And when we are talking of the company, it is not the advertising agency, it is the client or the brand which is advertising. And opportunities and threats are external to the company. That is, it is there in the macro environment, the industry in which that particular brand operates, or the global economy. Then the second step, the key planning tools are market research, surveys, focus groups. These are the tools. So you employ tools like surveys, focus groups. You can scan the secondary data. You can do secondary data analysis. You can have specialized softwares for analyzing secondary data, NVivo, Atlas, and all that. And then you need to have key consumer insights. Why does a particular consumer buy a particular product? What are the pain points? You look at the behavioral data, you look at the purchase behavior, you look at the pattern, how does he buy? And what are the things that we need to analyze? As I've said, these are the tools, but what are the things that you need to analyze are basically the market conditions, the size, the growth trends, the seasonality of the product, or the seasonality of the of that particular product. I'll give you an example. Once again, I'll give you my childhood example. When I was in school, I remember that ice cream, we did not have ice cream like the way we have them now. We have so many varieties and so many different ice creams. Like we have the ice cream bricks, which you can buy from your neighborhood shops. You have those cornetto cones and things like that, and you can have those cups. But when I was a school going kid, I remember ice creams were only sold in summers, sweltering summers. So you could go and buy from your neighborhood shop. They would have an ice box. Cold drinks were also there in those ice boxes, but you would have those cup ice creams. Or you could have the neighborhood wala, as I would want to say. You would have this ice cream cart, and the ice cream carts of today are completely different. Those ice cream carts were completely different. They were one like those water dispensing carts that used to be there at many cities and many places. I remember them in Janpath, Connaught Place, all over Delhi with lemon and mirchis hanging. So you had those aluminium cladded carts, and they had those orange dollies or mango dollies, or which you call as orange bars. They had those choco bars and they had those vanilla bars, but there was no brick. In the 80s, it was only at the late fag end of 80s that this concept of brick ice cream came to India, and some companies started manufacturing, and the pioneer among them being Vadilal. So Vadilal was the pioneer. Today you have so many homegrown brands. Even in my own city, I have a lot of homegrown brands which I don't find them elsewhere. So they are only selling in this particular city. So you have to think in terms of, that's just an example of seasonality of the product. So competitors, what is the share of voice, what is the share of stomach, messaging, what is the positioning of your rivals. So we'll understand and explain all these things as we go along. Consumer behavior, why does somebody want to buy, what is the consumer attitude towards a particular brand and towards a particular product, what are the purchase patterns of that particular consumer or that consumer group, and what is the brand position, how do people perceive that particular brand, what are the brand perceptions, what is the brand equity, what are the key strengths of my brand. So we are talking from the perspective of a particular client. So we need to understand the strengths and gaps. So where are we weak? How to take advantage of the strengths that we have? How to minimize our weaknesses? So the idea is in situation analysis is to identify and leverage the opportunities which are present in the environment based on our own strengths, and before we commit to any campaign. So when we set advertising objectives, there could be many types of objectives as we have seen along. It could be to educate and inform the consumers. It could be to build brand preference. It could be to remind people. It could be to precipitate sales. So you can have different types of advertising objectives. The idea is that these advertising objectives need to be very, very specific. We have to clearly define what the campaigns aim to achieve. For example, we say that we want to enhance the awareness levels by 20% in the next 6 months. What do we mean by that? Let's take a practical example. The practical example could be that I have a brand, and my brand, there are only, when I do a survey, I find that only 6% of the people of the entire market is aware of the brand. That means only 6% people know the brand. Now, if I want to increase my sales, I know that, let's assume that I work it out mathematically. I feel that 6% I only have, with 6% awareness levels, my market share is only 10%. Now I feel that if I were to increase this to 25% by an additional 20%, just to, it should be 26%. So if I were to increase this by 20% from this current 6%, it goes up to 26%. My market share from 10% will go up to 25%. Let's assume this is the mathematical formula that I have. And obviously this comes from experience and understanding the market. So if my objective is to increase the current sales from 10% to 25%, I know mathematically now that I have to increase my brand awareness levels from 6% to 26%. So this is an example of a specific objective. So I know what I want my campaign to do. I want my campaign to increase the number of people who are now aware of the brand. Earlier, only 6% people were aware. Now I need to know, now I need to know that at least 26% of the people are aware, and that is what I want to do. So I will have my campaign, I will devise my campaign in such a way that I'm able to reach a certain number of people, and which leads to at least 26% of awareness. And a 26% of awareness will give me a market share of, from 20 to 25%, and increase by 15%. It should be measurable. Obviously, it has to be achievable, relevant. It has to align with your company's business and market goals, and it should be time bound. So every campaign is always time bound. A campaign cannot be run endlessly. Theoretically, it's a possibility, but generally campaigns are for a limited period of time. So some examples, I've already given you example of, very simple example of how to increase awareness by 20% in 6 months, which is likely to result in a increase in market share or sales volume from 10 to 25%, which is basically 15% incremental market share. Or for example, one of the objectives could be to generate 10,000 website visits in Q1. So Q1 generally would be from January to March. So the idea is that if we advertise, and if we advertise so extensively on internet, there is always a possibility that it may generate 10,000 visits to the site, and these 10,000 visits may possibly lead to sales, or whatever might be the objective of the company. The other objective, rather than awareness, could be to improve sales by 15% during the campaign period. So if you have to increase the sales, you need to persuade the consumers, you need to make sure, and this could be done in multiple ways. It could be done by raising the awareness, as we saw in the previous example, or it could be by generating, for example, it could just be merely a sales promotion campaign. So we advertise that we have 15% off, or say, let's say we have 20% off, or we have 30% off, buy one get one free, 50% off. This could also lead to 15% increase during the campaign period. So if you look at the advertising decision making process, this is a nice slide which tells us that we need to understand the target market and who should receive the message. That's a key question. What should be our advertising budget? What should be our message strategy? That is what we want to say. What should be our exact message or the ad, what we want to say, and how should we say this, and is this likely to make an impact? And then we have to select the appropriate media which will be able to reach our intended target audience. And finally, the evaluation of the ad campaign, whether it has resulted in some kind of incremental gains for the organization or the company or not. And this could be in terms of sales, or it could be in terms of the communication effects. That is, whether it has been able to change the perceptions, create an image, create a personality, increase awareness, increase recall, recognition, enhance brand loyalty, things like that. So those are also measurable. So when we are developing the advertising campaign, we have to look at many things. We have to look at the creative strategy specifically, and we have to look at the appeals that we are going to employ. These are the things which we will be studying in a great detail at a later stage. So we have to look at the message appeal, whether we are going to have an emotional appeal, rational appeal, or we are going to use humor. How the copywriting is going to look like, what will be the theme, what will be the visual design, and then we have to look at the media, whether it's going to be in television, whether it's going to be in print, radio, outdoor, digital, a combination of all. So ultimately, we have to understand this. So the entire campaign may involve multiple media strategy, multiple ads. Couple of it is not that you will only have one print ad and one television commercial. There could be a combination also. So how do we evaluate, and what is actually happening in the industry these days? How is the evaluation done? Evaluation is done in the form of what exactly is evaluation? Evaluation is finding out whether the campaign worked for us or not. So how do we go about it, and what are the things that we actually look for? We look for reach and impressions, whether the reach has increased, whether the ad has been, if we advertise, whether it has been able to make any impressions in the mind of the consumer, whether it has been able to reach the consumer or not. Then what is the possible click-through rates? So this is especially for websites and all that. So what is the click-through rate? People see those links and people click on those links. So that is what as click-through rates. Engagement, shares, what has been the impact on sales, what has been the impact on brand recall, and these are the key things that we have to keep in mind. So advertising over the years has evolved from a simple public announcement informing about something, or a street hawker crying about his wares, or merely a classified ad in a newspaper. Advertising has come a long, long way. Advertising is all about 360-degree brand communication. That is what modern advertising management is all about.